Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, my name is Martin Ballard and welcome to episode 59 of this podcast series, and this time we're going to take a look at the role of music in pantomime with a composer and musical director.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, I hope you enjoyed the last episode when I caught up with Imagine's managing director Steve Bowden to talk about everything that's been happening this summer to get ready for the next panto season. That and all of the other previous episodes are still available to download. All you have to do is go to where you normally get your podcast from, and while you're at it, why not subscribe so that you don't miss out in the future? So this time, I've been joined by the man who's involved in countless new writing and musical theatre projects. He's a musical director, orchestrator, vocal coach and composer, also a musical supervisor for Imagine Theatre. It's Dan Jarvis. How are you, Dan?
Hello, yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Tell us a bit about your background, first of all, because I think it's fair to say that you had an interesting route into musical theatre because you're actually a sports science graduate, weren't you?
That's right, yeah, I am. I did sport and exercise science at Birmingham University. I was like 20, I graduated in 2011. And so it was always a toss-up between doing music or something sports or sciencey at university. And then, yes, and I ended up just choosing that route, and then somehow I wound my way back. So, I did 2 years basically getting involved in brilliant local Amdram societies, and they were so great at giving me that kind of platform to just try out what is this role, and I didn't really even know what I was doing at that point, and then ended up 2 years later applying to do musical direction at Mountview, and then just that 1 year kind of training, hands-on, being thrown into the deep end, it was kind of my springboard out into the industry.
So where did the love of music come from? Is that from a family sort of influence or just a love of listening to music?
I think I've always had a love of listening to music, and I started playing piano when I was 8. I used to pretend to play the organ in church, but way back in the day. But I think the whole love of music started with my dad, actually. Yeah, so he was a massive Queen fan. I'm told that I, would instead of watching any kind of, back then, we didn't have the old Netflix and stuff and stuff to put on, but I would watch Queen's greatest flicks 1 and 2 back to back. So so like Queen music was my kind of first exposure to music, and that led me to as a child building pianos out of cardboard boxes and guitars out of tennis rackets, and you name it, I probably made it.
So is piano your instrument, or do you play other instruments as well?
Piano is my main instrument, and is kind of the lens through which I compose and in a way kind of see music, but kind of done a lot of work to understand lots of other instruments. I can play percussion, drums, and also accordion, so another kind of keyboard-based instrument. But I do love strings, so I think string writing would be up there with one of the things I really love to arrange for.
So if we take you back to your childhood, when you weren't watching back-to-back Queen videos, did you ever go to see panto as a child?
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about this the other day, actually. We weren't really theatre goers as a family. This would have probably been until I was about maybe 10, 11, and we didn't spend money as a family going to the theatre. And I remember there was one Christmas that our granddad took us to see, I can't remember the name of the show, but I think it might have been Puss in Boots or Dick Whittington at Birmingham Hippodrome. And I remember that as like probably my first big theatre experience. And I was probably quite reluctant to go. I was like, why am I going to theatre? What is this? I just got dragged along, really, and I probably quite enjoyed it.
Obviously one of the biggest pantos in the country, Birmingham Hippodrome, massive, beautiful theatre as well. Do you remember much about the experience?
Not really. I think the thing that I remember most is probably the ice on the streets outside, which is a strange thing to remember. But I remember the huge auditorium, or how it seemed huge to me at that point. But yeah, there was just something about the experience that was not just the show itself, but just the whole thing of just going as a family and having that time out and having that time together, but going to see this thing that you're all watching and engaging in together. I don't remember any specifics about the show. I think potentially I think it might have been Brian Connolly might have been in it.
So did you actually take note of the fact that there was music involved in the panto and think about, even at that early age, whether that might be something you'd like to do?
Yeah, I think I probably did take note. The way I kind of heard music was different. I engaged with it very easily, I think. I don't think I would have thought, oh, I can see myself doing this, or this would be me one day.
One of the joys of panto is that it opens doors in terms of entertainment, let alone careers, for so many different people from different backgrounds. People who love live music, for instance, people who like stand-up comedy, people who like to see a magical act or a spectacle, and musical theatre lovers. I mean, it brings everybody together, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It brings, I think it's one of the mediums that does bring, that brings in, as you say, quite rightly, brings in people from all different walks of life who enjoy many different things, but it's all bringing people together for a theatrical experience.
So tell us a little bit about, once you'd actually graduated from Mountview, what was the next sort of step for you? Because you're obviously an accomplished pianist, but then to become a musical director, composer even, what's the sort of progression that you have to go through to get to that stage?
I think one of the things that kind of kick-started me off at Mountview was obviously just the contacts of the people that came in to work with us. And then it was just kind of a snowball effect, I think, in just doing the small jobs well and then getting recommended. And there's a kind of a gradual progression that I could probably see now looking back, trying to be diligent with my own practice. And I'd always also like think about how I see theatre and the function of music within it, and the whole suspension of disbelief element, I think, is quite a strong part of that. And I think I was kind of led towards the creative side of it. Really enjoyed writing and arranging, and then all of a sudden there's a job that you're like, oh, we need some parts for this, or we're going to have a band, and actually there's no budget to hire a separate arranger or orchestrator. So I guess I'm going to do it. And so I kind of just learnt on the job and took the experience that I had and just kind of learnt by doing with many of these skills, I guess. Yeah, and I invested in kind of vocal knowledge, and I did the Still course, levels 1 and 2, which gave me like a really good grounding. And I think it's so important for MDs to have that vocal awareness and be able to work with actors, singers, dancers, people with varying vocal abilities and different requirements, and being able to help them as best you can.
That's one of your sort of areas of expertise as well, isn't it? As a vocal coach, but also, even going back to your sports science days, part of that was looking very much at things like respiratory physiology and so on, which is all linked through to the voice, the diaphragm and all that sort of stuff. And when you come to do panto, as you said, you're working with all sorts of people from different backgrounds, and whereas some dancers or actors may have great singing voices, they've not necessarily been taught the technique that singers might have been taught, and that's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be a whole mixed bag. You've got professionals who are experts, like real experts in their craft. So, like potentially, the comics say, they're booked for that skill. Some have fantastic singing voices. Some know how to take care of it, and some don't. But why would they? And so it's so helpful for the production to be able to keep them on it and keep their voices fresh, and doing everything you can to help them. Being
able to sing a song particularly well as an actor or somebody who hasn't trained as a singer is great, but when you're doing 2 shows a day, 6 days a week for a 3 or 4 week run, you can do damage to your vocal cords without knowing it. You can actually overstretch yourself. And, as an MD, particularly with your background, knowing so much about not just the vocal coach side of your career, but looking at that health side as well, taking care of your voice, you will notice, somebody who might be able to hit a high note in the rehearsal room, but is at the top of their range and straining a little bit, they're going to do damage over that run, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's it's one of the things that I listen for in auditions as well. It comes right from the speaking voice, and just trying to gauge, is this something that is going to work? Are there habits here embedded that are going to cause difficulty with the longevity and the sustainability across it is such an intense period. It's one of the hardest runs, I think, because it's so intense with 2 shows, and so, some venues have 3 shows a day, and to keep that consistent and sustainable, is a real challenge.
Yeah, looking away from Panto for a moment, you've been involved in so many exciting projects in recent years. Not just as a musical director, but arranger, orchestrator, composer, and so on. What attracts you to new projects? Do you have to be excited by the initial idea? How do you get involved with these projects?
I think a lot of the time, offers do come from word of mouth and recommendations. Yeah, it's difficult. Sometimes you're like, if you need, we all need work. We all need to kind of stay in work to keep the pennies coming in to be able to pay the mortgage. But I think in terms of big projects, I'm definitely someone who wants to look at what is it, what's the story that we're telling, why is it important, what can I offer, what can I bring to this project, and does it excite me? Because I think for me it is important that a project brings that excitement and desire to tell a story and join a team and be able to collaborate. Just love collaboration with people, and you can create something that is far greater than the sum of what each of you individually brings, but bouncing off of each other and just taking ideas to the next level is really exciting. And it's really great to have that spring in your step and be enjoying what you're doing. And it's not always the case, and even in this industry, I know there are many people who are in different elements of the industry that don't necessarily enjoy what they do, which I think is a shame. And I think I'm count myself very fortunate to, on the most part, really enjoy the work that I do.
You've been involved in lots of exciting new writing workshops and some projects that have done really well. The Return of the Soldier at the Hope Mill, for instance, the Bowmaker as well. Brand new musical theatre is really important. I mean, while jukebox musicals and simple ideas are great and they put bums on seats, it's really important that we see a lot of new writing, not just storyline, but music as well. And we've seen some major successes in recent years. I guess Six is one of those. And more recently, Operation Mincemeat, which is doing particularly well at the moment. And that's really inspirational. It's really important that new writing continues to thrive, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely crucial. There are so many great writers out there, and it's so hard to get work on, and it's balancing that, the sustainability of a production, getting bums on seats, because that's an important part of it. But there are so many great stories out there to be told, and you look at shows that go to streaming platforms, in terms of film, and there's so many great new original ideas, and there are those out there as well in theatre, in straight theatre as well, but particularly in musicals, and they're harder to sell. They tend to be bigger budgets. They tend to be larger casts, and also require musicians. So it's harder to get on. But yeah, that's my area that I probably love the most, is working on new writing. And there's some great writers out there with some of the ones I've had the pleasure of working with, like Finn Anderson and Gus Gowland and Eamon O'Dwyer, just to name a handful. But there's so much homegrown talent in our country. Yeah, there's stories to be heard.
I think we're in a difficult time, more so than ever, where producers want to stage shows that they know are going to do well, and they're taking less risks with new work. And that's where the Fringe is really important for trying out new material. Six obviously famously started at the Edinburgh Fringe. A piece that you worked on, Paper Hearts, the Fringe in London as well. And I think that that's really important, isn't it? Tell us a bit about your role for Imagine as a musical supervisor. What does that mean?
Basically, because we probably many of the listeners will know that we use tracks to enhance the music, and especially with like the big production numbers, we need that extra strength in depth. And so one of the things I'll do is arrange the shows. So I will arrange a handful of shows that will go out each year. I will create the tracks, I'll create the scores, and then I will liaise with the MDs that are there at the shows on the ground, talking to them, checking if everything's fine there. And they'll probably sometimes send some requests back for some alterations, and so that's one element of it. And I also will tend to play for most of the auditions in the audition season. So as well as playing for them, I'll also be kind of an extra little voice, kind of on the panel, just kind of chipping in with thoughts and checking in on listening out for vocal health and different elements and range and all those things kind of is involved in casting as well.
So when it comes to working on a panto, whether you're with a live band or a track, there's a lot more work involved in that than most people would think, isn't there?
Yeah, there's quite a lot in terms of the tracks of, I guess. Yeah, I can go into detail here. Yeah, so we will we'll run the tracks through a QLab system, which basically lines up all the tracks which have been what we would call stemmed out. So for one given song, you'll have as many kind of components of that track. So you'll have the strings on one section, you'll have maybe the brass on another, you've got your other rhythm elements, you've got maybe guitars, they would all play in individually, but then obviously play together. So you've got control over the track to mix it. And obviously when you've got the live band as well, then you're mixing those elements together, the live and the track together, to try and make it sound as authentic as possible. If you're the MD in the pit, sometimes it's not as easy to hear what it sounds like out front. So I'd have a little thing where I would put my piano on the track just for when we're in tech and stuff. So occasionally I could fire it, let the band play, and I could go out front and listen and help the sound guy mix.
A lot of people who don't work in the industry may have heard the click or click track, that people talk about. Very often you won't have all the musicians in the studio at the same time anyway. You'll record maybe the strings, or you'll record the rhythm section or whatever. They'll all be done separately, and to keep everybody in time, the click track is important. But it's also important, especially when you've got part of the music on track and a live band as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So you need to keep everything together, basically. And so there'll be one track which is basically the click, which basically gives us like a literally what it is, a click, which will emphasize the strong beat, the first beat of every bar, and it'll just tick away in our ear that we will play against, which is just sent to us. So getting around that and being able to craft some stuff that feels natural and has time changes, tempo changes, to give a really realistic feel, then is another added challenge at the arranging stage, to try and integrate it, so and basically kind of like telegraph tempo changes, so that you can either make quick jumps in tempo that are going to be accurate.
And of course, it wouldn't be panto without an occasional cheesy key change either.
Yeah, we do get a couple in there sometimes, but we try and make them, even for panto, I guess from my perspective, I think I hold it with the with the utmost in integrity as well, musically, that it is a fresh piece of theatre that requires people's disbelief to be suspended, and it'll often be, obviously, it's often some child's first experience of theatre as well. So, and even though sometimes, we do love sometimes a bit of a cheesy key change, but I would like to say hopefully they are justified.
there'll be so many different musical styles in a panto. There could be a new Lizzo pop song, there could be a musical theatre classic, there could be a patter song from music hall or whatever. Obviously the infamous song sheet. It is a real mixed bag of musical genres, isn't it?
It really kind of tests your chops in terms of playing as well. Like you go from some such extreme styles, and which is really fun as well. You don't really get that in many other genres at all. And also from an arranging point of view, that really tests you as well in terms of getting your big band voicings right, and getting suddenly you're bringing out all the brass, and then you're then having to go into production mode if you're like covering one of the current pop songs that has a specific sound. And I think in terms of arranging as well, I'll try and use the original track as a reference, and to put in the signposts to go, this is what you're expecting to hear. You're expecting to hear this riff, and you're expecting to hear this drum groove. But at the same time, I try and bring something new and fresh that kind of makes it of its own, and also somehow feels then also cohesive with the rest of the piece that we're watching, so that it's not too jarring, but at the same time, it as I said before, it needs to kind of justify itself as to why we've made choices the way we have.
Just going back to Mountview, was that the stage in your training where you had a much better knowledge of the layers of music involved in musical theatre in particular, or any recording for that matter? Because obviously as a pianist, if you're playing in a band or an orchestra or any sort of ensemble, your place in that. But when you're arranging or composing, you need to have a better understanding of layers of music and how they mix together, don't you?
Yeah, you do. It's and how they fit together. And I think, and to be honest, I think I'm still learning this. I like to think that hopefully I get better with every job, and it's all experience, and it's all slowly getting better, encountering new problems, and trying to find solutions to these new problems as we work. But yeah, in terms of Mountview, we definitely did quite a different range of arranging tasks, and it was certainly helpful, kind of starting that journey. And I think I had done some arranging for Amdram as well, and and I think it's all been valuable, really. Just getting your ear in to be able to listen to what's important, what's not important, what the effects you can make, a range of things. Yeah.
I just wonder who your hero might be, if you have anybody in particular. You've worked on so many different things, from more commercial musical theatre through to Stephen Sondheim and others. Do you have a particular hero who may be an influence in your own composition work?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a number. I think there's a few that will probably integrate. I think, as I said before, massive Queen fan, so that kind of informs a few things. Always been a massive Billy Joel fan, so I used to. There's a lot of kind of 80s favourites, I probably would think. But in terms of musical theatre, definitely, I was a fan of Stephen Schwartz, Jason Robert Brown, and of course, Mr. Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah.
What a craftsman, what a brilliant writer in every single way. Yeah, I read a couple of his, his takes. He's got a couple of books, which I would urge any fan to try and get hold of and look at his commentary on his lyrics, which is, I think, Finishing the Hat and Look, I Made a Hat, two volumes, which just so insightful, and just how he thought about his craft, and it was really, really insightful and eye-opening.
My two favourites personally, geniuses, both of them, but at different ends of the musical theatre spectrum, if you like. Alan Menken, who's written so much classic stuff for Disney, but started with Little Shop of Horrors and has done Newsies and other musicals in recent years. And Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim, of course, so complex in his writing, so clever, and so demanding for musicians and singers.
It's like nothing else, really. It's... he has a habit of just hitting the nail on the head when it comes to lyric and music, and the fusion of the two together, the subtext of the music, and and the kind of the honesty of the writing, it's just brilliant.
Now, through all of your pantomime work with Imagine elsewhere, and even from your childhood, do you have a favourite pantomime?
I've actually never worked on a Cinderella until this year. So this year is my first couple of Cinderellas. But I think I'd only be able to say of all of the ones that I have done in terms of the show itself, I think my favourite so far would have been Beauty and the Beast, possibly because it's very high stakes in places. You don't necessarily get that as much across some of the other pantos. Obviously, you get moments of high stakes, but it has the story element, I think, can be so strong. And at least it was when I worked on the one we did I worked with my good friend Rob Marsden in Halifax, and the Beauty and the Beast. I was really proud of the work we did on that. And so I probably, if I have to say one, I'll say that one.
Plenty of room in that one for a dramatic underscore music as well, which is really important in pantomime. You mentioned Rob Marsden. One of the things we talk about when it comes to panto is how important it is for future generations, because a lot of children will come and see panto as the first thing they ever see in a theatre. Yeah. But to take that one stage further, you're very much involved in the education of young people, whether it be at Tring, whether it be at the London School of Musical Theatre, Mountview, or Staffordshire University. Is that something you get a particular joy from?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I really enjoy that kind of educational element, practically, but also theoretically, and just in developing that understanding, being able to kind of help other people kind of upskill. And probably comes as well from my own academic background, and kind of passing that on, and kind of in trying to inspire others and help in some way and give some back.
Well, it's a fantastic job that you do there. It's also a fantastic job as musical supervisor. I mean, there are lots of other exciting projects that you're involved with, which we're going to hear more about, I'm sure, in the coming years from various theatres around the country. But in the meantime, Dan, have a great Christmas. Enjoy the next pantomime season with the Cinderellas and other projects you're working on. And thank you so much for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
And that's it for now, I'm afraid. Thank you once again for supporting this podcast series. Don't forget, though, you can subscribe to Just Imagine, where you normally get your podcasts from. And you can check out all of the previous 58 episodes there, too. In the meantime, make sure you join me next time for episode 60, when I'll be chatting to more of the Imagine team about the use of technology in pantomime and how innovations help to develop the genre.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.